I stood in the middle of what used to be my living room, surrounded by boxes stacked high to the ceiling. My hands trembled as I sealed the last one with tape. The air smelled like dust and heartbreak. The curtains, once bright white, hung limp and faded against the windows, just like my marriage had faded over the years. I took a deep breath, trying to stop the tears from spilling, but they came anyway. My name is Martha Anderson. I'm 82 years old, and I thought after raising kids, burying friends, and holding a marriage together for over 5 decades, life would give me some peace. I was wrong. Peace doesn't come when you're married to a man who forgot how to love you the moment someone younger fluttered her eyelashes his way. Mother's Day was supposed to be special. I wore my best blue dress and curled my blonde hair, just like I used to in the old days when George couldn't take his eyes off me. I even set the table for 2, thinking maybe he'd surprise me with dinner or at least a heartfelt card. Instead, he waltzed in late, smelling like cologne I didn't recognize, with a crumpled bouquet of supermarket flowers. Price tag still on. $15. That's what 50 years of loyalty was worth to him. When I asked where he had been all day, he shrugged and said, "Busy. You know how work is." But I knew. The rumors had been swirling for months. Whispers from neighbors, odd charges on our credit card, the scent of perfume that wasn't mine on his shirts. And that night, as I sat at the kitchen table staring at the sad little flowers, my friend Carol called me. Her voice shook as she told me what she'd seen. George driving a red convertible, the one he bought for business trips, and pulling up to a mansion outside town. The woman who stepped out with him was young enough to be his granddaughter. Mansion. He bought her a mansion. I didn't even own that house we lived in. It was in both our names, but it was me who made it a home. Me who scrubbed the floors, cooked the meals, raised the kids while he climbed his corporate ladder. And here he was, giving palaces to mistresses while handing me pity bouquets. That night I didn't sleep. I lay there staring at the ceiling, listening to the snores of a man who no longer loved me, and something inside me snapped. I had been quiet for too long. I had swallowed too many tears, too many insults disguised as jokes, too many lonely nights waiting for someone who was never coming back to me. By morning my decision was made. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I didn't ask for an explanation because I didn't need one. I simply started packing. Every photo, every dish, every piece of jewelry that was rightfully mine went into those boxes. I even took down the curtains I sewed myself 30 years ago. The house looked as empty as my heart, and yet, for the first time in years, I felt strangely alive. While he spent his days with her, I spent mine making calls, to real estate agents, to appraisers, to buyers. The house sold faster than I expected. Maybe because it was in a good neighborhood, or maybe because fate wanted me to be free. I didn't tell George. I didn't need to. The day the deal closed, I stood at the door, the keys in my hand, and smiled. Not a sad smile, but the kind that comes from knowing you've taken control of your life. I placed the keys on the counter, along with a neatly folded note. When George came home, he would find nothing but empty rooms and silence. And that note, the one that would tell him everything he needed to know. As I walked out, locking the door for the last time, I felt the weight lift off my shoulders. The sun was setting, painting the sky with colors too beautiful to waste on regret. I drove away with the boxes in the back seat, my heart pounding with anticipation. He would come back any minute now. He would open that door. And when he did, he would realize exactly what I had done. Because the note I left behind, it wasn't just words. It was a bombshell that would shatter his perfect little world. I parked my car a few blocks away from a small inn on the edge of town. The place was modest, tucked between tall oak trees and a creek that sang quietly under the moonlight. It wasn't a mansion, but it felt safe. Felt mine. I checked in under a different name, just to make sure George couldn't find me too soon. Not that he'd come looking right away. He'd be too busy figuring out where everything went. As I placed my suitcases on the bed, my phone buzzed. It was my neighbor, Susan. "Martha," she whispered urgently. "Your husband's home. He's screaming your name like a madman. The whole street can hear him." I smiled faintly. "What about the note?" I think he found it. He stopped yelling after that. He just sat on the porch. Martha, what did you write? I didn't answer. Instead, I let my mind wander back to that piece of paper I had folded so carefully. It wasn't long, but every word was a knife. Asterisk George. You gave her a mansion. You gave me $15. This house. Sold. Everything else you thought was yours is gone. You may have bought her love, but you'll never buy back your soul. Don't look for me. Martha asterisk. I imagined his face reading those words. His jaw tightening, his eyes narrowing, his hands shaking. For once, he'd be the one left speechless. For once, he'd feel the emptiness he forced me to live with. The next day, I treated myself to breakfast at a little diner. The waitress, a young woman with freckles and a kind smile, served me pancakes with extra syrup. You look like someone who's celebrating, she said. Maybe I am, I replied. As I sipped my coffee, a strange feeling washed over me. Freedom. I hadn't felt it in years. I no longer had to wait for George to come home, no longer had to shrink myself to fit into his shadow. I was 82, and I was finally living for me. But freedom doesn't come without its shadows. Around noon my phone rang again. This time it was our daughter, Emily. Mom, what the hell happened? Dad's losing his mind. He called me crying, Mom. He says you sold the house. Is it true? Yes, I said calmly. Why would you do that? That was our family home. She snapped. Our family home. I laughed bitterly. Emily, your father gave another woman a mansion while he handed me flowers worth less than a dinner bill. That house stopped being a home the moment he stopped loving me. There was a long silence on the line. Finally she said, You should have talked to me first. I didn't need to, I replied and hung up. That evening I sat by the window of the inn, watching the rain fall. Each drop felt like a memory washing away. But just when I thought I could breathe, the phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't Emily or Susan. It was an unknown number. I hesitated, then answered. Martha. His voice was low, almost trembling. George. What have you done? He asked. There was no anger in his tone now, only disbelief. You sold everything. The house, the furniture. Everything we built together. No, George, I said softly. You destroyed what we built. I just cleaned up the mess. You think you can just walk away, he growled. I already did. For a moment there was silence. Then he said something that made my blood run cold. You have no idea what you've started. The line went dead. I sat there, clutching the phone, my heart pounding. His words weren't just angry, they were a threat. As the rain turned into a storm outside, I knew one thing for certain. This was only the beginning. Because George wasn't going to let this go. And neither was I. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of my phone buzzing non-stop. Messages piled up. Some from unknown numbers, others from old friends, and one after another from Emily. They all said the same thing. George is furious. He's telling everyone you've lost your mind. I smirked as I poured myself a cup of coffee from the small inn kettle. Let him talk, I whispered to myself. But deep inside I felt the tremor of fear. George was not a man who lost gracefully. For decades he had been the one in control of the house, the finances, and, in many ways, me. I had seen what he could do when his pride was wounded. He wasn't above lies, manipulation, or even cruelty to get his way back. Later that day, while I was reading by the fireplace in the inn's lounge, the receptionist approached me nervously. Mrs. Anderson, she said quietly, a man came by asking for you. He said he was your husband. I told him you weren't here. My stomach tightened. Did he leave a message? She nodded and handed me a folded piece of paper. On it, in his sharp handwriting, were only 3 words. You'll regret this. I crumpled the note in my hand. A part of me wanted to run, go to another town, another state, anywhere he couldn't find me. But another part of me, the part that had been silenced for years, stood up straighter. I wasn't running anymore. That night I called my lawyer, a young but sharp woman named Claire who had helped me with the house sale. "Claire, I think George is going to try something," I told her. "Martha," she said firmly. "He can't do anything. The sale was legal, and all the funds are in your account. You have the right to start over." "I just have a feeling," I murmured. "You've done nothing wrong. If he comes after you, we'll handle it legally," she reassured me. Hearing her words gave me some comfort, but I still double-locked my in-room door that night. The following morning, as I walked out to get fresh air, I saw him, George, standing by his car across the street watching me. His face was unreadable, but his eyes were filled with a storm. I froze, clutching my coat tighter. He didn't approach me. He just stared for a long, chilling moment before getting back into his car and driving away. Back in my room, I paced nervously. He was planning something, I could feel it. Then my phone pinged. It was a photo message. When I opened it, my breath caught in my throat. It was a picture of our old backyard, the one where we used to have barbecues and play with the kids. The caption read, "This isn't over." My hands shook as I sat down on the edge of the bed. He was taunting me, letting me know he still held pieces of our past and wouldn't let go. I tried to calm myself by focusing on my new life. I opened my bank app to check the money from the sale. The amount was still there, large and comforting. But as I stared at it, another thought crept in. How long before he tries to take it? Later that afternoon, I decided to meet with Claire in person. We sat in her sleek office overlooking the city. I told her everything about the notes, the photo, the threats. She leaned forward, her expression serious. "Martha, you need to move the money into a separate account that he has no access to. We'll also file a restraining order if he keeps harassing you." I nodded, feeling a spark of strength return. "Do it. Whatever it takes." When I left her office, the sun was setting, casting long shadows on the pavement. I thought I was finally a step ahead of him. But when I returned to the inn, my heart sank. My door was ajar. I rushed inside. Everything looked untouched except for one thing. My suitcase had been unzipped, and on top of my neatly folded clothes sat another note. This one wasn't written in anger. It was chillingly calm. "You can move the money, Martha. You can run. But you'll never hide from me." My knees went weak. He had been in my room. While I was gone. I locked the door, my hands trembling. The storm outside matched the one in my chest. George wasn't just angry. He was hunting me. The wind howled against the inn's windows that night, but it was nothing compared to the storm raging inside me. I sat in the corner of the room, clutching a lamp like it was a weapon, listening for the faintest creak of the floor. My heart pounded so loudly I thought it would wake the other guests. Barely slept. By sunrise, I knew I couldn't stay here. George had already found me once. He'd do it again. Packing was quick. I shoved my things into the suitcase and checked out without even eating breakfast. As I drove out of town, I called Claire. "He broke into my room," I said, my voice shaking. "Martha, did you call the police?" she asked. "What would they do? He didn't steal anything. He just left a note." "That's still harassment," she said firmly. "Go somewhere safe. I'll handle the restraining order today." I hung up, but her words didn't soothe me. Where was safe when the man hunting you used to know everything about you? My favorite places, my habits, my fears. I ended up in a small coastal town 3 hours away, where the sea air was thick and salty, and the waves crashed endlessly against the shore. I rented a cottage from an old fisherman who didn't ask questions. He just handed me the keys and said, "The ocean keeps secrets, lady." For a moment, I almost believed him. I spent the next few days trying to live like George didn't exist. I walked along the beach, bought groceries at a small store, and even baked bread in the little kitchen. Each night, I locked the doors and windows, telling myself I was safe. But on the 4th day, the phone rang. No caller ID. My gut told me not to answer, but I did. "Martha." George's voice slithered through the line. My stomach twisted. "What do you want, George?" "I want what's mine," he said. You think you can sell my house, take my money, and just disappear? You're not smarter than me. You never were. That house wasn't yours, I snapped. It was ours. And you gave away your loyalty long before I sold it. He chuckled darkly. You're cute when you think you're clever. But this game ends soon. You can't run forever. The line went dead, and I stood there, gripping the phone so hard my knuckles turned white. He knew. Somehow he knew where I was. That night I didn't just double-lock the doors. I pushed a chair under the knob and slept with my shoes on, just in case I had to run. The ocean roared louder than usual, as if warning me. By morning the first thing I noticed was the front door. It was still locked, but something was wedged under it. A single rose. My blood ran cold. Picked it up carefully. The petals were soft, but there was a note tied to the stem. Happy Mother's Day, Martha. Remember, you're never really alone. My hands shook as I crumpled the note. He was here. In this town. Watching me. Called Claire immediately. He's here, Claire. He left a rose at my door. He's playing with me. She exhaled sharply. Martha, pack your things. I'm sending someone to pick you up and take you to a safe house. Don't stay there another night. Agreed. I packed quickly, my heart hammering against my ribs. As I zipped the suitcase, I heard something outside, the crunch of gravel. Peeking through the curtains, I saw a black car parked down the road. The windows were tinted, but I knew. I felt him staring at me. Suddenly, the engine roared, and the car sped off. When the driver Claire sent finally arrived, I climbed into the back seat, my eyes scanning every shadow. We drove through winding coastal roads, but my fear didn't lessen. At every turn, I expected his car to appear behind us. When we reached the safe house, an isolated cabin surrounded by tall pines, the driver reassured me. No one will find you here. I wanted to believe that. But as I unpacked my things, I noticed something that made my heart stop. Inside my suitcase, tucked neatly between my clothes, was another rose. And a new note. Nice try, Martha. I'm closer than you think. I dropped the rose and stumbled back, my breathing shallow. He had been in my things. Again. The night fell quickly, the forest around the cabin whispering with secrets. I sat by the locked door, clutching my phone, knowing one thing for sure. George wasn't going to stop until this ended one way or another. The night in the cabin was suffocating. Every creak of the floorboards, every gust of wind through the trees, made my heart leap into my throat. I kept the lights dim and sat in the corner, clutching the phone with Claire on speed dial. Sleep never came, it was stolen by fear. By dawn, I decided I couldn't live like this anymore. Hiding was no longer enough. If George was always one step ahead, then I needed to stop running and start thinking like him. For years he had controlled everything. But now, it was my turn to be the one with a plan. I took out the note he had left in my suitcase and studied it. His handwriting was neat, calculated. He wasn't just threatening me, he was enjoying this. The George the First had once loved was gone. What remained was a predator. As I sipped my coffee, I called Claire. I need to secure everything. The money, my new identity, everything. I want him to have nothing to use against me. Martha, she said, I've already moved your funds to an account only you can access. And I've started the process for a protective order. But I'm telling you, you need to stay hidden. No, I said firmly. I'm done hiding. I want to set a trap. There was a pause on the line. A trap? Yes. He thinks he's smarter than me. Let's make him prove it. Claire hesitated but eventually agreed to meet me in person to discuss a plan. While waiting for her, I made sure to change all my passwords, cancel my old phone, and buy a burner phone in town. I wasn't going to give George any more openings. Later that afternoon, I met Claire in a quiet cafe. I told her everything. How he had been leaving roses, how he had broken into my room, how he seemed to know my every move. He must have put some kind of tracker on your things, Claire said. Her words hit me like a slap. Course. That's how he was always ahead. We searched my suitcase and, hidden in the lining, found a small black device. Tracker. My stomach churned. All this time he'd been following me like a hunter tracking prey. Claire immediately called a contact to have it analyzed, but I already had an idea. "We're not just going to remove it," I said with a smirk. "We're going to use it." The plan was simple but risky. We would place the tracker in a decoy bag and send it far away, somewhere George would chase blindly. While he was distracted, I would take steps to completely cut him off, legally and financially. That night, under the cover of darkness, I handed the decoy bag to a trusted driver who headed toward a different state. I imagined George following it like a fool, thinking he had me cornered. The next morning, I felt a strange sense of relief. For the first time in weeks, I could breathe without fear clawing at my throat. I even allowed myself to take a walk through the pine woods around the cabin, inhaling the crisp air. But my relief was short-lived. When I returned, the cabin door was slightly open. My blood froze. I stepped inside cautiously. Everything looked the same except for one thing. On the kitchen table sat a vase with a single rose, fresh and glistening with dew. Next to it, another note. "Clever, Martha. But not clever enough." I dropped the note, my hands trembling. He hadn't followed the decoy. He was still here. He was always here. The sun dipped below the horizon, and the forest seemed to grow darker, thicker, almost alive. I locked every window, every door, and sat in silence, waiting. Hours passed. Midnight came. The clock ticked loudly in the quiet cabin. Then, from the woods outside, I heard it, a faint whistle. The same tune George used to hum when he came home from work decades ago. My chest tightened. He was out there, watching me. The whistle stopped, replaced by the sound of slow footsteps on the gravel path leading to the door. I grabbed the lamp, my only weapon, and held my breath as the steps grew closer and closer. Then silence. Minutes crawled by. Finally, I dared to peek through the window, but there was nothing. No one. Just the trees swaying under the moonlight. I stepped back, my pulse still racing. Maybe he had gone. Maybe it was my imagination. But then I saw it, something glinting on the floor just inside the door. Mickey. The one I had hidden in my bag. He had been inside while I was gone. Again. And he wanted me to know it. My hands shook as I backed away, my breath coming in short gasps. This wasn't just a game to him anymore. This was war. I realized in that moment, if I didn't find a way to end this, George would never stop. And I wasn't sure how much longer I could survive his game. I didn't sleep that night. Couldn't. I sat on the couch clutching the lamp like a weapon, my eyes darting to every shadow that moved across the walls. The forest outside whispered and howled, but it wasn't the trees I feared. It was the man who used to share my bed. By sunrise, my hands were shaking, not from exhaustion but from rage. I was done being the hunted. It was time to turn the tables. The first thing I did was call Claire. "He's been in the cabin again," I said. My voice cracked, but there was steel in it. "He left my own key on the floor." Claire swore under her breath. "That's it. I'm calling the police. This is breaking and entering. You have proof now." "They won't catch him," I said bitterly. "He's too careful. But I'll catch him." "Martha." "No," I interrupted. "He thinks I'm weak because I'm old. But being 82 doesn't mean I'm helpless. I have nothing to lose anymore, Claire. And that makes me dangerous." She stayed silent, knowing there was no talking me out of this. Finally she said, "Then let me help. Whatever you plan, I'll back you." After our call, I started setting things up. I bought cameras, tiny, hidden ones, and placed them around the cabin. I also got a motion sensor alarm, the kind you can arm remotely. If George came back, I would have evidence. But evidence wasn't enough. I needed him to reveal himself in a way he couldn't escape. That afternoon, I went into town to gather supplies. I kept looking over my shoulder, expecting to see his black car, but there was nothing. No sign of him. The quiet was almost worse than the stalking. It meant he was planning something too. When I returned to the cabin, I left the door slightly ajar on purpose, as if inviting him in. I wanted him to think I was careless, that I was afraid and losing control. Night fell quickly, and I sat in the dark, waiting. Hours passed. The cameras were recording. My nerves were stretched thin. Then, just past midnight, the motion sensor beeped softly. Someone was outside. My heart pounded as I watched the monitor. A shadow moved past the trees, then toward the porch. The figure stepped into view. Tall, broad shoulders, and moving with the confidence of someone who thought they owned the place. George. He tried the door, and when it opened easily, he slipped inside. My breath caught as I crouched in the corner, holding my phone ready to trigger the alarm. He walked slowly, scanning the room like a predator. I could hear his voice, low and mocking. "Martha. Come out, my love. No need to hide. You know you can't run from me." My chest tightened, but I stayed silent, my finger hovering over the button. He stepped further inside, closing the door behind him. That's when I pressed it. The alarm blared, shrill and piercing. George froze, looking around wildly. What the? Bright floodlights outside snapped on, illuminating the porch. Cameras clicked, capturing every second. George spun around, realizing he had been trapped. I stepped out from the shadows, my voice steady. "You're not the hunter anymore, George." His face twisted with anger. "You think this changes anything? You think a little alarm is going to save you?" "No," I said, holding up my phone. "But this will." I tapped the screen, and the live feed from the camera streamed directly to the cloud. "Every move you've made tonight is recorded and sent to my lawyer. If you take one step toward me, the police will have it all." For the first time, I saw fear flicker in his eyes. He took a step back, his voice low and venomous. "You think you've won. This isn't over, Martha. You've started a war you can't finish." He stormed out, disappearing into the night, but not before throwing one last glare over his shoulder. I locked the door behind him, my knees finally giving out as I collapsed to the floor. I was shaking, but not from fear, from adrenaline. I had faced him, and I had survived. But deep inside, I knew he wasn't done. His pride wouldn't let him walk away. And as I stared at the cameras still recording, I whispered to myself, "Let him come. Next time I'll be ready." The forest was silent again, but the silence felt heavier, charged with the storm that was still coming. Because George wouldn't stop until one of us was destroyed. And I wasn't planning on being the one to fall. The morning after the confrontation, the cabin felt different. The sunlight streamed in through the windows, but instead of warmth, it felt like a spotlight, like the world was watching to see what I would do next. I brewed coffee with shaky hands and sat by the table where George had once left his rose. My phone buzzed with a message from Claire. The footage uploaded perfectly. "I've sent everything to the police. They'll contact you soon. Stay safe." For a moment I allowed myself to breathe. Maybe, just maybe, the law would finally catch up to him. But deep down I knew George. He was too careful, too slippery. He wouldn't let himself be cornered that easily. I spent the day reinforcing the cabin. Extra locks, heavier curtains, even a wooden bar across the front door. I wasn't going to be taken by surprise again. Yet, with every step I took to secure myself, an uneasy thought gnawed at me. He hadn't truly fought back yet. By nightfall, the forest around me felt alive with tension. The pines swayed, whispering secrets I couldn't hear. I sat on the couch with my phone in hand, scrolling through the footage from last night. George's face, caught in the glow of the floodlights, sent shivers down my spine. Suddenly the phone rang. Unknown number. My chest tightened as I answered. "Martha." His voice was calm, too calm. I stayed silent. "You think you're safe because of some cameras?" He chuckled darkly. "You think the police scare me? You're forgetting, Martha. I know you. I know what scares you. And I know what you love." My voice trembled. "Stay away from me, George." "Oh, I will," he said. "For now. But you're not the only one who can play games." The line went dead. I sat frozen, my mind spinning. What did he mean by "what you love"? My children. My granddaughter. My oldest friend, Carol. Panic clawed at my chest. I immediately called Emily. Mom, she answered groggily. Are you safe? Is everyone safe? What? Yes, we're fine. What's going on? Just keep your doors locked. Don't let anyone near the house. Promise me. She hesitated. Mom, you're scaring me. Promise me, Emily. Okay. I promise. I hung up, but the fear lingered like a shadow in my chest. George had crossed the line into threatening the people I loved. And that made him even more dangerous. Later that night, as I tried to rest, the motion sensor beeped again. My heart leapt into my throat. I checked the monitor. Nothing but trees swaying. No figure, no movement beyond the branches. Still I stayed awake, clutching the lamp like a lifeline. By dawn, exhaustion overtook me, and I dozed off on the couch. When I woke, the cabin was bathed in soft morning light. For a brief moment, I thought maybe I'd imagined everything. Then I saw it. On the windowsill, where there had been nothing the night before, lay a photo. I picked it up with trembling hands. It was a picture of Emily, taken from outside her house. A chill ran through my veins. He wasn't bluffing. He was watching her. I grabbed my phone and called Claire, my voice shaking with rage. He took a picture of my daughter. He's threatening my family. Martha, listen to me, Claire said firmly. Pack your things and get to the safe house I've arranged in the city. Has full security, cameras, guards, everything. You can't stay there anymore. Agreed. Within an hour, I packed up everything and left the cabin behind, my eyes constantly scanning the rearview mirror. The roads twisted through the forest, and every shadow felt like him. When I reached the city, the safe house was everything Claire promised. Modern, secure, and under constant watch. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I had an edge. But that night, as I settled into the unfamiliar apartment, the phone buzzed again. This time it was a video. My breath caught as I played it. It showed George standing in the driveway of Emily's house, waving at the camera with a sinister smile. Then he spoke, his voice dripping with malice. You can hide behind all the guards you want, Martha. But remember, I'm always one step ahead. Tomorrow you'll see what I mean. The video ended, leaving me shaking so hard I nearly dropped the phone. Tomorrow. He was planning something big. I didn't sleep at all. My mind raced with possibilities, each one worse than the last. When the first rays of light pierced the sky, I knew one thing for certain. If George was coming, I had to be ready for war. Because this time he wasn't just after me. He was coming for everything I loved. And I wouldn't let him win. The city woke slowly, but my nerves were already frayed by the time the sun crept above the skyline. I hadn't closed my eyes all night, pacing the length of the safe house while every creak and hum of the building made my heart skip. Claire had assured me the place was fortified, with 24/7 surveillance and guards patrolling the lobby. Yet, I couldn't shake the feeling that George's threat wasn't empty. At 8 a.m., Claire arrived with 2 police officers. They reviewed the video George had sent and promised to keep patrol cars near Emily's home. We'll make sure your daughter is safe, one officer said. But even as he spoke, I could tell he didn't fully understand the kind of man George had become. After they left, Claire pulled me aside. Martha, we can't just react to George anymore. We have to end this. Legally and decisively. I agree, I said, my voice trembling but steady. What do we need to do? She laid out a plan, pressing full charges for stalking, harassment, and breaking and entering, combined with freezing any shared assets he might still control. We would also file for an emergency protective order that covered Emily and her family. It was a good plan. But I knew George. He would make his move before any of this took effect. That evening I called Emily again. Stay inside. Lock everything. Don't even open the door for delivery men. Mom, you're scaring me more with every call, she said, her voice shaky. Promise me, Emily. She sighed. I promise. After the call I tried to relax. I made tea, sat by the window, and watched the street below. The guards patrolled in shifts, and everything seemed calm. For a brief moment, I allowed myself to hope maybe George had backed off. Then my phone buzzed. Another unknown number. My stomach dropped. I answered, my voice barely a whisper. "What do you want, George?" He chuckled softly, a sound that sent chills down my spine. "I told you I'd show you what I meant. Go check your email." My hands shook as I opened my laptop. There was an email with no subject line. Clicked it. A live stream appeared, showing Emily's backyard. The camera was shaky, as if someone was holding it from the shadows. My daughter was inside, completely unaware. My heart stopped. "If you touch her." "I won't," George said calmly. "Not unless you make me. You have something I want, Martha. Transfer the money back to me by midnight, and I'll disappear. Refuse, and you'll regret it." The stream ended. I stared at the screen, my pulse pounding in my ears. Claire rushed into the room when she saw my face. "What happened?" "He's at Emily's house," I gasped. "He's watching her right now. He wants the money." Claire immediately called the police. "We're sending officers now," she said, but my mind was spinning too fast to process her words. Midnight. He had given me a deadline. As the night crept in, I sat by the window clutching my phone. Every sound outside felt like the beginning of something terrible. The guards remained at their posts, but fear wrapped around me like a shroud. At 11:45 p.m. my phone rang again. "George." I answered, my voice shaking. "George, don't do this." "It's simple, Martha," he said. "Wire me the money, and your daughter wakes up safe. You have 15 minutes. I swallowed hard. "You won't win this time." He laughed darkly. "Watch me." The line went dead. Desperate, I called Emily. No answer. Called again. Still nothing. Tears burned my eyes as I screamed to Claire. "We have to go. Now." But before we could leave, my phone pinged. Another video message. I opened it, my heart pounding. The video showed Emily's house, her porch light flickering. The camera moved closer and closer to the front door. Then it stopped and the screen went black. A single line of text appeared on the video. "Time's up." The room spun. I grabbed my coat and bolted for the door, ignoring Claire's protests. I didn't care about the guards or the plan anymore. My daughter was in danger, and I wasn't going to let George take her from me. As I raced down the stairs, my phone buzzed one last time with a new message. "You should have listened, Martha. Now watch what happens next." I stopped cold, staring at the screen, my chest heaving. The video started to play. The last thing I saw before it cut off was a shadow moving inside Emily's house. My heart felt like it would burst out of my chest as I sped through the city streets in a taxi, clutching my phone with trembling hands. Claire was beside me, frantically calling the police and shouting directions to the driver. "Go faster," begged. Every second felt like an eternity, every red light a cruel obstacle. As we neared Emily's neighborhood, I saw flashing police lights reflecting off houses. 2 squad cars were already there, officers moving with flashlights across the lawn. The front door of Emily's house hung open. My breath hitched as I jumped out of the cab and ran. "Ma'am, you can't go in there," an officer shouted, but I shoved past him. "That's my daughter," I screamed. Inside, the house was eerily silent. No signs of forced entry except the open door. The living room lights were still on. A cup of tea sat half-finished on the table. "Emily!" called out, my voice cracking. No answer. I ran upstairs, my legs burning. I flung open her bedroom door, empty. My chest tightened. I was about to collapse when I heard a soft voice from the closet. "Mom!" I yanked the door open, and there she was, trembling and clutching her phone. I pulled her into my arms as relief washed over me like a wave. "Oh, thank God. Oh, thank God." "Someone was in the house," Emily whispered, her voice shaking. "I heard him humming. That tune Dad used to hum. He tried the bedroom door, but I locked it. Then he left." Tears filled my eyes as I held her tighter. "It's over, baby. You're safe now." But even as I said the words, I knew it wasn't true. George had been there. He could have hurt her, but he didn't. Why? Downstairs, the police were collecting fingerprints and checking the security cameras. One officer approached me. "We caught someone on the street cameras," he said. "Tall man, black jacket, ball cap. Matches your description of your husband. But he slipped away before we got here." Claire placed a hand on my shoulder. "We'll get him, Martha. We have enough evidence now to put him behind bars." But my gut twisted. George wasn't careless. He left that camera footage on purpose. This was still part of his game. Back at the safe house later that night, I held Emily's hand, refusing to let go. Claire sat across from us, scrolling through legal documents. "We'll file every charge possible. Harassment, breaking and entering, attempted kidnapping. With everything we have, the court will issue a warrant for his arrest by morning." Emily looked at me with wide, fearful eyes. "Mom, what if they don't catch him? What if he comes back?" I kissed her forehead. "Then I'll be ready." Around midnight, the safe house grew quiet. Emily finally fell asleep on the couch, but I stayed awake, staring at the door. My phone buzzed suddenly, making me jump. Another message from George. It was an audio recording this time. His voice filled the room. "You think the police scare me. You think hiding behind laws makes you strong. You've forgotten who I am, Martha. I don't lose. And tomorrow night, everything ends." The message cut off abruptly, leaving the room in silence. I forwarded the recording to the police immediately, but fear gripped my chest. Tomorrow night. What was he planning? The next day was a blur of police interviews and security reinforcements. Officers installed new locks, motion sensors, and stationed cars outside the safe house. I should have felt safer. Instead, the sense of dread only grew stronger. As evening approached, the city seemed to hold its breath. I sat by the window, clutching a kitchen knife, while Emily stayed close to me. Claire called with updates every hour, but even her confident tone couldn't ease my anxiety. At 11 p.m. the power went out. The entire building plunged into darkness. My heart leapt into my throat as Emily screamed, "Mom! Stay close to me," I whispered, pulling her into the corner. The backup lights outside flickered on, but inside the rooms were pitch black. Then, faintly through the silence, came that tune. That same haunting whistle George used to hum. It echoed through the hallways, closer and closer. I gripped the knife tighter, my hands trembling. Emily buried her face into my shoulder, sobbing quietly. The whistle stopped. A step. Slow, deliberate, approaching the door. The knob turned once. And then, with a loud crash, the door burst open. The silhouette of a man filled the doorway. Tall, broad, and unmistakably him. George stepped into the room, his face illuminated by the faint glow of the emergency lights. His eyes burned with madness. "You thought you could beat me, Martha," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "But this is where it ends." I raised the knife, my breath shaking. "You'll never hurt us again, George." He smirked, taking a step closer. "You don't have it in you." The moment stretched like eternity, until suddenly, the room exploded with blinding light and shouting. "Police! Drop the weapon!" Officers stormed in from behind, their guns drawn. George froze, his smirk fading as they tackled him to the ground. The knife clattered from his hand, and he roared with rage as they handcuffed him. Emily sobbed in my arms as the officers dragged him away, his screams echoing down the hallway. Even as he was taken, his eyes locked on mine. "This isn't over, Martha. You hear me? This isn't over." But I knew it was. Or at least I prayed it was. The safe house fell silent again, the chaos fading into the night. I sank to the floor, holding Emily tightly, my tears finally spilling. For the first time in weeks, the weight began to lift. But in my heart, I couldn't shake the feeling that George's words weren't just empty threats. And as the officers drove him away, I realized something chilling. The game might be over for now, but the war was far from finished. The morning after George's arrest felt almost unreal. The sun rose over the city, spilling golden light into the safe house, but my hands still trembled as I held my coffee. Emily sat beside me, pale and quiet, her eyes fixed on the floor. Neither of us had slept much. The echoes of last night, the crash of the door, the shouting, George's furious screams, still lingered like ghosts in the room. Claire arrived early, her expression stern but relieved. They've charged him with multiple counts: breaking and entering, attempted assault, harassment, and violating restraining orders. He's in custody, Martha. You're safe now. The word felt strange on my tongue. Could I really believe it? George had always found a way back before. The police officer assigned to our case entered shortly after. We're holding him without bail, he said. We've also secured the video and audio evidence. You don't have to worry. He's not getting out anytime soon. For the first time in weeks, I let out a shaky breath. Thank you, I whispered. Emily squeezed my hand. It's over, Mom. It has to be. But that nagging voice in my head whispered otherwise. George was resourceful, dangerous, and full of pride. Even behind bars, he could still find ways to hurt us. Later that afternoon, Claire suggested we go to the courthouse to finalize the protective orders. We'll make it so he can't come within 100 miles of you or Emily if he ever gets out, she said. I agreed. Walking into the courthouse felt like stepping into another world. Sterile, cold, yet full of quiet power. As I signed the final documents, my hands stopped shaking. For the first time I felt control. George no longer had a say in my life. When we left the courthouse, Emily hugged me tightly. You're stronger than I ever knew, Mom, she said through tears. I smiled faintly. I didn't know it either. Not until I had to be. We returned to the safe house, but the air felt lighter. The police continued their patrols, and the guards stayed on duty, but for once, I allowed myself to rest. I took a long bath, washed away weeks of fear, and looked at my reflection in the mirror. An 82-year-old blonde woman stared back at me. Her face lined with years of love, loss, and now resilience. That night, Emily cooked us dinner. We laughed softly over the meal, trying to reclaim the normal moments George had stolen from us. For a fleeting hour, it felt like life could start again. But just as we finished eating, a guard knocked on the door. Mrs. Anderson, there's something you should see, he said, his voice tense. He handed me a sealed envelope that had been delivered anonymously to the building's front desk. No return address. My heart pounded as I opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper. In George's handwriting. You think prison can hold me. You think this is over. Watch your back, Martha. I'll be closer than you think. The guard called it a scare tactic. Claire said it was desperation. The police promised extra surveillance. But as I stared at those words, I felt the cold grip of his presence again. That night I double-checked every lock, every window, every corner of the safe house. Emily tried to comfort me, but fear twisted in my chest. I knew George. He wouldn't go down quietly. Near midnight, unable to sleep, I stepped onto the balcony to clear my head. The city lights stretched endlessly, twinkling like stars. For a moment, I closed my eyes and breathed in the night air. When I opened them, my heart stopped. Across the street, barely visible in the shadows, a figure stood still, watching. The street light flickered, and for just a split second I saw him. George. Even from that distance, I felt his gaze burn into me. He raised his hand slowly, as if to wave, and then melted back into the darkness. I stumbled backward into the room, slamming the balcony door shut, my breath coming in ragged gasps. He had escaped. Somehow, someway he had slipped through the cracks. I grabbed the phone with shaking hands to call Claire and the police, but deep inside, I knew the truth. This wasn't just another threat. George was out there. And this time, he wasn't coming for the house or the money. He was coming for me. The safe house erupted into chaos within minutes of my call. Police sirens wailed through the night as patrol cars surrounded the building. Officers swept the streets, searching for any sign of George, but he had vanished as quickly as he appeared. I stood at the window clutching Emily's hand, my heart thudding like a war drum. Claire arrived not long after, her face pale but resolute. "We just got word," she said, closing the door behind her. "George escaped during his transfer to a higher security facility. He attacked a guard, stole his uniform, and slipped out before anyone realized. They've issued a statewide manhunt." Emily let out a sob. "How is that even possible? How can he keep getting away with this?" I pulled her close, trying to stay strong even as my own knees threatened to buckle. "He's cunning. He's always been cunning. But they'll find him." Claire looked me in the eye. "We need to move you again. Somewhere even he can't track." But my gut clenched. I was tired of running. Tired of looking over my shoulder, waiting for George to strike. "No," I said quietly. "This ends here." Claire frowned. "Martha, he's dangerous. You need to stay hidden until they catch him." I shook my head. "All my life with him, I've been the one who hides. I've been the quiet wife, the shadow. Not anymore. If George wants to play this game, then I'll be the one to finish it." The police weren't convinced, but they agreed to increase protection. They stationed officers both inside and outside the safe house, cameras on every corner, guards at the entrance. Felt like a fortress. Still, an unsettling thought gnawed at me. George was clever enough to slip past any barrier. The next morning, I woke to find a folded piece of paper under my pillow. My blood ran cold. How? The house was swarming with police. How had he gotten in? I unfolded it with trembling hands. "Your guards can't stop me. Your walls can't keep me out. Tonight we end this." I rushed to show the officers, who immediately checked the security footage. Nothing. Not a single frame of George entering the room. It was like he had appeared out of thin air. By afternoon, tension hung in the air so thick you could cut it with a knife. Emily stayed close to me, her eyes wide with fear. Claire worked on her laptop, arranging for federal agents to intervene. The hours crawled by, the sun sinking slowly until night draped the city in shadows. The officers checked in constantly, their radios crackling with updates from the search teams. Still no sign of George. At 10 p.m. the power cut out. The safe house was plunged into darkness. Panic surged through me as officers shouted and scrambled for flashlights. Emily clung to me, her body trembling. Then came the whistle. That same haunting tune, drifting through the dark hallways like a ghost. "Positions!" An officer barked, guns drawn. The whistle grew louder, closer. My breath caught as a figure emerged in the dim emergency lights. George. His face was twisted with rage, his eyes wild. "You thought you could trap me, Martha," he snarled, stepping toward us. "You thought you could humiliate me." The officers aimed their weapons, shouting for him to stop, but he laughed, a chilling, hollow laugh. "You won't shoot me. Not before I take back what's mine." I stepped forward, my voice steady despite the terror clawing at me. "You've lost, George. You lost the moment you raised your hand against me." His smile faded, replaced by something darker. He lunged. The room exploded into chaos. Officers tackling him, Emily screaming, alarms blaring. George fought like a madman, throwing punches and roaring with fury, but this time he was outnumbered. They wrestled him to the ground, forcing his hands behind his back. As they dragged him up, bleeding and cuffed, he locked eyes with me one last time. "You think this is over?" he hissed, his voice low and venomous. "It's never over, Martha. Never." The officers hauled him away, his threats echoing in the hallway. When the lights finally came back on, I collapsed into a chair, shaking. Emily wrapped her arms around me, sobbing. Claire knelt beside me, her voice trembling. "It's done. He's going back into custody, and this time they won't make the same mistake." But as I looked at the darkened doorway where George had stood, I knew the truth. He would never stop on his own. And if I wanted true freedom, I would have to be the one to stop him. The city was quiet the next morning, but my mind was anything but. George was back in custody, heavily restrained, locked behind layers of steel and surveillance. The officers assured me this time there would be no mistakes. They had him in a high-security federal facility, the kind no one escapes from. Still, I couldn't shake the memory of his words, whispered through gritted teeth as they dragged him away. "It's never over, Martha. Never." For hours, I sat by the window of the safe house, staring at the skyline, replaying everything in my head. Emily dozed on the couch beside me, her hand clutching mine even in sleep. She had been so brave, but I could see how deeply the fear had settled in her. This wasn't just my fight anymore. George had poisoned everything and everyone around me. Claire arrived at noon with updates. "He's locked down, Martha. Maximum security, no contact with the outside world. The feds are involved now. He won't breathe near you again." I nodded, but my gut still churned. "And if he does?" Claire's voice softened. "Then he won't walk away from it this time. I promise you." For the next few days, life slowly crept toward something resembling normal. Emily and I stayed at the safe house while the legal wheels turned. The courts fast-tracked his trial, stacking charges so high even George's arrogance couldn't save him. I should have felt relief. Instead, I felt something else. Something sharper. One night, I stood on the balcony again, staring out into the city's glow. For the first time, I thought not of fear but of power. George had taken so much from me. Years of my life, my peace, my dignity. But he hadn't taken everything. He hadn't taken me. That night I made a decision. The next morning I told Claire, "I want everything in my name. Every last asset he ever touched. Freeze it, transfer it, I don't care how. If the law says I can have it, I'm taking it." She smiled faintly. "You've got fire, Martha. I'll make it happen." Over the following weeks we moved quickly. George's accounts were seized. His properties tied up in legal battles he couldn't fight from behind bars. The mansion he gave his mistress. Sold. The luxury cars he flaunted. Every cent he thought he controlled slipped through his fingers and landed squarely in my hands. When the trial finally came, I stood in the courtroom, my head held high. George was led in wearing shackles, his eyes burning with hate as he saw me. For the first time I didn't look away. The trial was long and brutal. His lawyers tried to paint me as unstable, but the mountain of evidence crushed every argument. Videos, recordings, witnesses. Each piece nailed the coffin shut. When the judge finally read the sentence, 25 years with no chance of early release, George roared in rage, thrashing against his restraints. Officers dragged him away as he screamed my name, spitting threats into the air. I stood still, my heart pounding, and watched as the doors closed behind him. That was the last time I saw George. Months passed, and slowly the fear faded. Emily and I moved into a small but beautiful house by the ocean, far from the city, far from the memories. Each morning I walked along the shore, letting the waves wash away the ghosts of the past. On Mother's Day, Emily handed me a bouquet of wildflowers and hugged me tight. "You deserve the world, Mom," she whispered. I smiled through tears. "I already have it." As we sat on the porch watching the sunset, I felt something I hadn't felt in years, peace. But even as the waves crashed gently against the sand, I couldn't help but glance at the horizon, half expecting to see a shadow watching me from the distance. Because with George I had learned one thing: even caged animals dream of breaking free. And if he ever did, I would be ready. For now, though, I had won. The nightmare was over. The life he tried to destroy, I had rebuilt it stronger than ever. And this time no one, not even George, could take it from me. Waterwave, if this story kept you on the edge of your seat, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Your support helps us bring more powerful stories of resilience, betrayal, and unexpected twists to life. Broken Heart Sparkles. Speech balloon comment below. What would you have done if you were in Martha's shoes? Bell turn on notifications so you never miss the next gripping tale of courage and justice.